What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Just Another Day. I'm your host, Jalal Sandy, and today we don't have as much on tap as we did last time, but I do want to get into some NBA news that happened last week and also continue my NFL preview, divisional previews. And this week, I'll be doing the NFC East and the NFC South. But before we get into that, make sure you follow me on Twitter at jsandy45 underscore. That's my personal Twitter page. The podcast Twitter page is at JAD underscore pod. You can find the podcast page on TikTok and IG at JAD underscore pod as well. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review. That will truly help me out. And without further ado, let's get into it. So I do want to start with the NBA just quickly. There isn't much to go through, but some things happened last week, so I do want to go through them pretty quickly. First, I want to talk about Kevin Durant. He has finally made his decision, which honestly is no surprise to me and probably to most basketball fans that have been following this since July. He will be returning to the Nets, and all of the drama that we went through for the last 2 months are all for nothing. He thought he had leverage. I don't know who told him he had leverage, but it was non-existent. He's on a 4-year extension, and that first year of that extension starts this season, this next season coming up. In order for a team to acquire him, they would have to give up so much of their team that it would, in theory, make absolutely no sense to actually trade for him, given what the Nets were asking for. Like, if the Suns traded for him, they would have to give up DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and all these different pieces to the point where, yeah, you have your big three, but you don't have a bench. You don't have the supporting pieces. And now your team looks very reminiscent of the 2020 Nets that we just watched a couple years ago with a big three and no depth behind it. I don't have much to say. I feel like this is the second or third time I've touched on this topic. I said back in July when Rudy Gobert got traded that there's no way in hell Kevin Durant is getting traded based on the change that happened in the trade market. So maybe he decides by the trade deadline, like, hey, stuff still isn't working out. But every trick he tried did not work. He tried all these different tactics to try and gain some leverage, and the Nets did not budge at all. And credit to them for saying, "Yeah, you're pretty much stuck with us until we feel like it's okay to get something for you." So credit the Nets for not folding when Kevin Durant was trying to apply pressure, and also being able to bring Kyrie back as well. In other NBA news, Chet Holmgren, the rookie drafted by the OKC Thunder, the second pick of 2022 draft, is out for next season with a Lisfranc foot injury. And obviously, you never want to see a rookie get hurt before he even has a chance to step on an NBA floor. But I'm not going to jump and say that he's a bust. I do think that it's obvious that he needs to gain some weight and put some muscle on because he is very thin. His frame is very skinny, but he has immense talent, all the skill in the world for a big man. I don't think he's a center. I think he's more of a power forward, but skills that he showed throughout high school and at Gonzaga last year, and even a little bit in summer league, there's a reason why he was the number 2 pick. And getting injured your first year does not mean that your career is over. Joel Embiid did not play his first year. Ben Simmons did not play his first year. And I know people hate Ben Simmons now, but he had a great rookie year. Blake Griffin also got injured his first year, did not play, came back, won rookie of the year. So this is not the end all be all of his career, but maybe it is eye opening to him to maybe take better care of his body and take his physique a little bit more seriously and just strengthen up, get stronger, come back. And hopefully the foot injury is not that severe. I know KD had the same type of injury a few years ago, but uh, I this is a very rare injury, and I've only seen it happen with Kevin Durant. So, um, prayers up to Chet Holmgren. I hope he gets healthy, full recovery, and yeah, I want to see him on the court because OKC. I want them to stop tanking. I want to see this talent come to fruition and get them a playoff berth. I'm tired of seeing them win 20 games a year and get a top five pick and do nothing with it. So we'll see what direction OKC decides to go in, whether they'll continue to tank. And if they do, they may consider trading Shea Gilgeous-Alexander because he's 23, 24 years old. Um, and while he may wait for the rebuild for the tank, players get frustrated losing every year, year in, year out. And, he may ask out middle of the season saying, like, I don't want to go through this anymore. So I would keep an eye out on that. But other than that, OKC does have a lot to build on. So hopefully the talent that they've acquired in the last 2 to 3 years can help them improve this year, even though they won't have Chet next season. And lastly, the most recent NBA news. Patrick Beverley traded to the Los Angeles Lakers for Taylor Horton Tucker and Stanley Johnson. This trade is not really like anything special. I think it does help the Lakers. They get somebody who plays defense and can shoot. I just think it's hilarious that, obviously Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook playing on the same team is pretty funny. Um, Patrick Beverley used to talk a lot of shit to LeBron when he was on the Clippers, and now that he's on the Lakers, he's probably going to be his number one supporter. So that's going to be funny. Also, um, the Lakers' value of Taylor Horton Tucker and what they could have gotten instead of what they actually got. They could have gotten Kyle Lowry a couple years ago. They could have re-signed Alex Caruso instead of giving Taylor Horton Tucker this new contract. But instead, now you just have Patrick Beverley and you're grasping at straws. It doesn't seem like Russell Westbrook is getting traded. And I feel like the only way he won't end up on the roster next year is if they agree to a buyout. And I don't know if the Lakers would be willing to do that, but who knows? Maybe they decide they want LeBron to be their point guard for next year, and just have Patrick Beverley as the off-ball guard, secondary ball handler, and continue from there. Moving on to my NFL divisional previews. As I said before, we will be doing the NFC South and the NFC East. So starting with the NFC South, the way I did it last week was go from the team I think is going to be the worst up to the team that I think will win the division. So starting over with the NFC South, the Atlanta Falcons. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything about the Falcons. The Falcons are absolute ass. They're not good. And that's okay. They just traded their franchise quarterback. Honestly, they lost two franchise players, even though Julio Jones was not playing to that level. In the last 2 years, they've lost Julio Jones and Matt Ryan. Calvin Ridley will not be playing next year. So there's sort of like a missing identity of their offense. I'm not sure what direction they're going in offensively. They're definitely going to run the ball, but they traded for Brian Edwards. They draft Drake London out of USC, and they have Kyle Pitts. And I'm curious to see what they decide to commit to, whether that's passing more or running the ball more, because last year it felt like they ran the ball a lot with Cordell Patterson, and I believe Mike Davis was their backup last year. Um, their quarterback situation is very shaky. They signed Marcus Mariota, who's cool. He's a cool backup. But he is not, he's 28 years old, and maybe he can give them something and help out his own value for the future. And maybe, they end up trading him next year. Um, if Des Ridder is who he will be, but yeah, this is a young team with a lot of inexperience. They're still building their O line. Um, and I think for the majority of the season, Marcus Mariota will be running for his life. And I hope he stays healthy, honestly. But, with the way their O line looked last year, with Matt Ryan barely having a clean pocket to throw, I think their offense will get really ugly this year. However, on the defensive side of the ball, I do like a few pieces they have. Grady Jarrett is probably the best player on defense, either him or AJ Terrell. Both all pro, all Pro Bowl type players. Deion Jones is also really good. They signed Rashawn Evans, and I think he was solid in Tennessee, in my opinion. They also signed Casey Hayward, the cornerback from the Chargers, who is getting up there in age, but I think he's still good to give them to be their second corner. Um, I'm not a fan of their safeties, and I think they do have missing pieces. They don't really have an edge rusher that I'm confident in saying can turn their defense around, but they do have on ball, off ball linebackers. They do need edge rushers. They do need safeties. So there's a lot going on here in Atlanta, but it's clear that they're trying to build something. I like some of their pieces on defense. And I like their pieces. I like their receivers if Calvin Ridley is playing, but with Drake London being the number one, I'm not sure how that will turn out for this season. But once Calvin Ridley comes back next year and they have Kyle Pitts and Drake London, sky's the limit for their offense as long as they get their O line healthy or their O line working the right way, working together, and being productive. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers. They went through a hell of a year last year. They trade for Sam Darnold. That didn't work out. Christian McCaffrey gets hurt again. Um, they have brought in a new coach, and while I thought he wasn't bad, it's definitely an adjustment whenever a team gets a new coach, new system, new schemes, and I think this is his second year coaching. So, they came into this year with a plan. They went out and got Baker Mayfield to be their quarterback. Christian McCaffrey is coming back healthy. They still have Sam Darnold, even though I think he just got injured. He sprained his ankle or something like that. So the QB competition really isn't a thing anymore. Baker Mayfield will be their starting quarterback. And I hope that he is solid. He struggled in Cleveland last year. Granted, um, they Odell asked to be cut. And with good reason, because it felt like every time Odell was open, Baker was just like, yeah, Odell's not catching this ball. Like he's wide open, but I don't really mess with him like that. So I'm gonna just sell his ball over his head because yeah. Um but they do draft Ekwanu. Ah, Jesus. They do draft Ike Ekwanu as a left tackle in the first round. They do extend DJ Moore. Um Their defense is very solid. This team was my sleeper last year, and I had so much faith in Sam Darnold to be average, and he was just so bad. Like I couldn't even believe how bad he was. But they have Brian Burns and Derek Brown. They signed Matt Ioannidis, and they still have Shaq Thompson and Dante Jackson. They signed Xavier Woods. Jeremy Chin is becoming one of the best safeties in the NFL. So their defense is very solid. Oh, and I forgot to mention J.C. Horn, who got injured last year, but they drafted him in the first round, and he was looking like he was going to be the defensive rookie of the year until he got hurt. But yeah, I love their defense, and their offense is dependent on two things. I think their O line is good enough, but the two main factors are, will Christian McCaffrey be healthy, and how consistent will Baker Mayfield be? That's it. DJ Moore, I think, is highly underrated. Robbie Anderson is good for his role. He's a deep threat and nothing else. Terrence Marshall, we haven't seen much of, but I did like him coming out of college last year. They did sign Rashad Higgins from Cleveland. So him and Baker Mayfield have some chemistry. That may work out well. But this is all on Baker Mayfield's consistency and Christian McCaffrey's health. If one of those doesn't work, this team won't contend to be in the playoffs. They will not be fighting for a wild card spot. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints. For me, the Saints and the Buccaneers are like a 1B, 1A situation. And the only reason that I'm putting the Bucs over the Saints is because of who's playing quarterback for each team. So let's just start with the Saints. They re-signed Jameis Winston to a 2-year deal, bring in new head coach Dennis Allen, who was the defensive coordinator for them when Sean Payton was their coach. So I think that's a pretty seamless transition. They still have Alvin Kamara. They bring back Mark Ingram. Michael Thomas is finally healthy. I think he pulled his hammy last week, but hopefully he's healthy. They signed Jarvis Landry to play in their slot. They draft Chris Olave in the first round out of Ohio State, and he was really good in college. They drafted a left tackle, Trevor Penning, but he just got hurt, and he's out indefinitely with a foot injury. However, their O-line is still solid. It always has been solid. So I don't think that should be an issue. But here's where I think, and this is why I feel like Tampa Bay and the Saints are so close. The Saints defense is really, really good. With Cameron Jordan, Marcus Davenport, Demario Davis, they go out and get the top safety on the market in Tyrann Mathieu from the Chiefs. They also signed Marcus May. They still have Marshawn Lattimore. You know, they still have CJ Gardner-Johnson and PJ Williams. Like, their secondary is absolutely insane. And they still have Cameron Jordan and Marcus Davenport, like I just said. So their pass rush is good. And Demario Davis has been playing at an all-pro level for the last 2 or 3 years. They have the weapons on offense. They have the pieces on defense. This comes down to solely Jameis Winston. I'm not counting on Michael Thomas being the straight-up number one receiver, because if he comes into the season not healthy, they may have to lean elsewhere. They may have to lean on Alvin Kamara or Jarvis Landry, or maybe Chris Olave steps up. I'm not sure. But Jameis Winston has shown a lot of good in his career and a lot of bad. It's inconsistency from year to year. He was the number one overall pick in his draft however many years ago, but he's also the guy who threw 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in the same season. So you really never know what you're going to get with Jameis Winston. But if he is consistent enough and he learns this offense and allows the offense to flow through probably Alvin Kamara, that's probably their best weapon, I think everything else will fall into place. And moving on to who I think will be slightly better. Another reason I think it's so close is because in years past, the Saints have played the Bucs extremely well. With the exception of that playoff game 2 years ago, I think the Saints have beaten them every single time they played. So they know the Bucks really well. They know their strengths and weaknesses, and they see each other 2 times a year. Like this is a really good rivalry. These are two really good teams. I think both teams will make the playoffs. Um, but to get into Tampa Bay, like I'm not gonna spend too much time. We know their team: Tom Brady, Leonard Fournette, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They do not have Gronk anymore. He did retire. Chris Godwin is coming off of an ACL injury, but he should be back relatively soon. Um, Julio Jones, they signed him after the Titans released him. I think he can be decent. Will he stay healthy? I don't know. If I had to bet on it, I'd say no. My issue and my concern with the Bucks is their offensive line, especially the interior. They do go and get Shaq Mason, but they lost their starting center, Ryan Jensen, and their left guard retired. So that remains to be seen. That seems like that may be an issue, especially when you're playing teams like the Saints and the Panthers, who have, and honestly, the Falcons too. All three of them have great interior defenders. So it'd be curious to see how their own line works. And then on defense, they signed Akeem Hicks from the Bears, who's been really good for them for about 3 or 4 year stretch, maybe even longer than that. But he really started to break out once Khalil Mack got there. They still have Vita Vea. They re-signed William Golston, and they let go of Ndamukong Suh and Jason Pierre-Paul, but they have Joe Tyron or Trot. They have Joe, but they have Joe Tryon. So I think he'll fill in rather nicely. They did spend a pretty high draft pick on him, so they have confidence that he can probably fill in very well. And then the rest of that front seven: Shaquille Barrett, Levante David, Devin White, like it's absolutely their front seven. They might have the best front seven in the NFL still, even though they lost some pieces because those three linebackers run everything. Shaquille Barrett, Levante David, Devin White, absolutely ridiculous. And Vita Vea locks up the middle when trying to run. You cannot run on this team. It's been impossible for the last 2 years when they're healthy. And that was the issue last year. They had a lot of injuries, so they weren't. The defense was very inconsistent. They had injuries in the secondary and on the defensive line. So, yeah, what this comes down to is will their defense stay healthy? Given what happened last year, and um, how sturdy and how consistent will the O line be? I I'm sure they'll get it figured out, but it may take some time in the beginning of the year. Um, so I'm really curious to see how their O line works. Will they stay healthy? And other than that, there should be no concerns. They'll be one of the best teams in the NFC, one of the best teams in the NFL. As long as you have Tom Brady behind center, playing quarterback, you should be fine. Moving on to the NFC East, we are starting with the New York Giants. The Giants have a lot at stake this season. Uh, they need to figure out what they're going to do with Saquon Barkley after this year is over. They did not pick up Daniel Jones' 5th-year option. I don't blame them. I think Daniel Jones is absolute trash. And I think this year will determine what direction they go in with their team building because they have some weapons on offense, but it's not enough for them to be a dominant offense. And then on defense, I really like their D line and some of their pieces in their secondary. But again, I feel like they should lean on their defense more and just be a run heavy team. But um, the reason I think the Giants are the worst team in this division is one, their quarterback play. Daniel Jones is the worst quarterback in this division. He is absolutely putrid. And regardless of him having Saquon Barkley next to him and having the likes of a Kadarius Toney and improving O-line, they drafted Andrew Thomas last year. They draft Evan Neal this year. So they are making a concerted effort to improve their O-line. But if your quarterback sucks, like it really doesn't matter. he's shown flashes in the past of athleticism and accuracy at times, but he is so turnover prone and so inconsistent. It is like mind boggling. Like there's times where he looks like the guy that the Giants spent a first round pick on, and there's other times that you question, did the Giants even evaluate him correctly? Um, and on defense, like I said, I do like their defensive line with Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams and drafting Kayvon Thibodeau and even Aziz Ajulari, who is decent. I think their D line, their pass rush would be solid, but their linebackers are bad, very, very, very bad. Blake Martinez is not that good. He can tackle, but he cannot cover anyone. I mean, he might be able to cover me, but he can't cover a tight end, a running back, damn sure not a receiver. And I believe this is the last year on his contract. So if he's not playing well, I feel like they may look to move him if someone's interested. But um, this is like the main hole in their team entirely. They have very weak linebackers. Um, so that's something I look for them to rebuild as the years go on. I do like Adoree Jackson and Xavier McKinney in their secondary. Julian Love is okay. Darnay Holmes is okay, but there's definitely room for improvement. First, starting off with their quarterback play. And if Daniel Jones makes me look like an idiot, so be it. But I have no reason to believe, based on the last 3, 4 years, that Daniel Jones will be anything of a semblance of a franchise quarterback. Moving on to the Washington Commanders. Um, this team is frustrating because, I always felt like they were a quarterback away, but not like Carson Wentz. Like, I understand it. You want to trade for a quarterback because that's the most important position in football, but Carson Wentz is not that guy, man. He's just not. And I can't even say like the Commanders don't have the weapons to be good because they do. Terry McLaurin, one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL. They draft Jahan Dotson. They have Curtis Samuel and Logan Thomas. Antonio Gibson, while he has fumble issues, is very talented as well. J.D. McKissick is also a very good pass catching back. They drafted Brian Robinson out of Alabama. Prayers up to him as he is recovering from gunshot wounds, but I'm sure he will be back at some point during the season. Um, and their O line is decent all around. Um, but I just don't believe in Carson Wentz at all. Like I saw what he had with the Colts last year, having Jonathan Taylor, having Michael Pittman, having a much better O line than this, and you know they had an opportunity to make the playoffs, and he absolutely failed. He sold bad. Um, their defense should be very, very good again, especially once Chase Young comes back. He is recovering from ACL injury, but they still have De'Aaron Payne and Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweat. Their secondary with William Jackson and Kendall Fuller. Is it Kendall? Yeah, making sure I didn't confuse him with his brother. Kendall Fuller, Bobby McCain. Their secondary is pretty solid. And Landon Collins, who's also coming back from an Achilles injury, should be back at some point. So their defense will be solid. I believe in their defense. It's their offense that gives me the heebie-jeebies. It scares me. I have no faith in Carson Wentz. I haven't for a few years now, and I don't know why teams keep giving him a chance. The Eagles did the right thing by letting him go and just putting faith into Jalen Hurts for the time being. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys, and I don't feel great about the Cowboys. I think they're good. a good team, but not a great team. They still have Dak Prescott, obviously, and Ezekiel Elliott. Tony Pollard kind of broke out a little bit last year, but trading Amari Cooper, I think, hurt their team because they don't have any healthy receivers outside of CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert. They signed James Washington. He's hurt. Michael Gallup is recovering from an ACL injury. Not sure when he'll be back, but he won't be ready for week one. Dalton Schultz is one of the best tight ends in the league at this time, but um, I don't know if they'll re-sign him. And Tyron Smith, who has been one of their best O linemen for the last 10 years, just went out with a huge injury. So their offense is very questionable, to say the least. And then on defense, they lose Randy Gregory, who had the best year of his career last year, but they still have DeMarcus Lawrence. They bring in Anthony Barr from Minnesota. Micah Parsons was Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. And honestly, he's probably the best player on this team, not named Dak Prescott. Leighton Vander Esch, they re-signed him. And their secondary, I think, is good enough. Trayvon Diggs is a ball hawking corner, but he does get cooked a lot. With that being said, I think Malik Hooker and Anthony Brown and Jaron Curse will be good enough to make their secondary average. Trayvon, they do force a lot of turnovers, and that's something that they really built on last year. So maybe, and turnovers year to year do vary so much. So maybe they can't rely on it so much next year. But they have guys that make plays. And as long as you have that, you should be able to help out your offense. And the offense is going to need a lot of help. I think there'll still be a high power offense because I believe in their rushing attack with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. But their receiving weapons are almost non-existent outside of CeeDee Lamb. We don't know what Jalen Tolbert is. So it's sort of like a wait and see kind of thing. And I can't say that they'll retain their crown as NFC East champs because at this moment it doesn't look like they will. And lastly, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, who made one of the biggest moves of the offseason, going to get A.J. Brown, who is one of the best receivers in the NFL. His only issue is his health. He does not stay healthy. Since his rookie year, his games played have gone down year by year. But the Eagles have good enough weapons they should make the playoffs, and they have good enough weapons to overtake this division. Jalen Hurts is a question mark at quarterback because of the consistency of his accuracy, but he is one of the best rushing QBs in the NFL. While Miles Sanders is not a great fantasy football option, he is still a decent running back. And with Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott there, they will run the ball. And it's possible that, they could be top of the league in rushing again. Now with A.J. Brown added to Devontae Smith and Zach Pascal getting him from the Colts, their weapons are pretty secure. Dallas Goedert being at their tight end with Zach Ertz out of the picture now. I think this offense takes another jump. Again, that is all dependent on Jalen Hurts and how accurate he can be from game to game and throughout the course of the season. But I think he can do it. And, if he can't, they will probably have to find a new quarterback. But I think the strength of this team, besides their run game, is their secondary. They brought in Darius Slay a couple years ago. They went and got James Bradbury. Anthony Harris is a very, very solid safety who was on the Vikings a couple of years ago. They still have Hassan Reddick, who's an edge rusher who's solid, and Brandon Graham, who's been there seems like forever. Fletcher Cox, who also has been there forever. They draft Jordan Davis out of Georgia, who looks like everything that they want him to be and what they drafted him to be in the first round. So I think this team will be carried by defense and running the ball, and having a weapon like AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert will definitely help out Jalen Hurts. He just has to get the ball to them when necessary. Um, so, just for a recap, I have the Eagles winning the NFC East with the Cowboys in second, the Commanders in third, and the Giants in last. And for the NFC South, I have the Bucks barely winning their division with the Saints in second, but still making the playoffs, and the Panthers in third, and the Falcons in last. That is all I have for today. Make sure you follow me on my socials, Twitter at jsandy45 underscore. All the socials for the podcast are JAD underscore pod. Um, Next week, I will do more divisional previews, and maybe I'll do Game of Thrones so far kind of thing. So we'll see about that. Um, but that is all I have for today. Thank y'all for listening, and I will see y'all on the next one.